There's nothing better than a movie you love getting a sequel, unless that sequel sucks. But sometimes the movie sequel isn't a movie, it's a video game. Ever wondered what happened after the Underminer attacked at the end of Incredibles? We got an answer back in 2005. You know there was another Matrix adventure going on the same time as Reloaded? Well, there was. Did you know in Meet the Robinsons, this isn't the first time that Wilbur went back in time and met Lewis? Well, you should have made a video about it. Licensed games have been around since the advent of gaming. Expanding on that, they sucked since the advent of gaming. Guys, did you know E.T. for the Atari 2600 is bad? Oh my god, guys, I think that might be the first recorded instance of anyone ever saying that on the internet. Oh my god, what an honor. Typically, you'd just take whatever hit new movie was coming out, shit out a low budget, more often than not low quality, interactive retelling of its events, and call it a day. Instant seals, sometimes. But sometimes, companies like to go above and beyond with their movie tie-in games. See, instead of taking the basic virgin approach of remaking a film story just with a crappy PlayStation 2 version of Neo, the Chad game developers out there would choose the more ballsy move of making their tie-in game a sequel to the movie. And it's because of that, we're left with a handful of licensed games out there that further add to the lore of the movie they're based on, introducing new storylines and new characters to the universe. To me, this always showed a bunch of trust by movie studios, to just let some guys from an entirely different company mess with your IP. And while oftentimes these game studios would work closely with the writers and artists on the film, other times they were just kinda given the freedom to do whatever the hell they wanted. It's created these bizarre, obscure offshoots of some of the most famous movies of all time, something these companies surely would not allow nowadays. And to be fair, most of these games are still bad, but I feel like there's more effort here than your average adaptation. Saying that, I always hated movie sequels as video games. As a kid, at least. I don't know. When I bought a game called Wreck-It Ralph based on the movie Wreck-It Ralph, it's because I wanted to play an interactive version of Wreck-It Ralph. Sue me.
Y'all ever seen Wreckin' Ralph?
Yeah.
She was the glitch.
Yeah.
You telling me they don't look at me like the motherfucking glitch?
At least be courteous and give the thing a subtitle. Like Nightmare Before Christmas, Oogie's Revenge, where Jack Skellington gets a weird snot wig. But there's no denying that there's something much more interesting worth talking about with them compared to a game that just follows the plot of the film beat by beat. So let's check them out one by one and ask ourselves the question, is this a satisfying sequel? I feel like one of the most famous examples of a movie tie-in sequel is The Incredibles, Rise of the Underminer. It's interesting they even made this considering The Incredibles already got a tie-in video game only a year prior. I guess it did well enough to warrant a follow-up in some form. Like I mentioned back in my Meet the Robinsons game video, this is around the time when Disney was really trying to get into the gaming scene, to be respected as a publisher. They say as they put out Finding Nemo for GameCube. Yeah, it's weird. It turns out for people to respect your games, you have to make them, like, not rushed and shitty. Wild. Anyways, I never played either of the Incredibles games as a kid, but I had a friend who had the original one for PlayStation 2, and I always wanted to play it. He was one of those friends where when you were over at his house, you had to watch him play his games. The prick just couldn't compare. Mostly. I suppose it only made sense for them to use the movie's cliffhanger ending as the basis for a sequel. Want to see what happens next? Another $60, loser! Although, to begin, I do have to acknowledge that with the release of The Incredibles 2 back in 2017, Rise of the Underminer is no longer the official sequel to the original. Now it's like a weird, non-canon, alternate universe thing. It's still kinda cool. This game was put in good hands though, with Heavy Iron Studios at the helm. You might know them as being the guys who did SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, one of the most beloved licensed games of all time. Even if you didn't see their logo on the title screen, it is not hard to notice it shares a lot of traits with it. The robot designs immediately reminded me of that game, as well as each new enemy getting a quick intro animation showing what they're capable of. Stuff like that adds a lot of charm to a game which, to jump ahead a bit, isn't great. To start, I do have to praise it graphically. Visually, not so much, but we'll get to that. But all the character models look great, the animation in particular is fantastic. There's so much squash and stretch with each movement, it's probably the highlight of the whole thing. Some of these Disney games look fucking great for the time they released. There were clearly hundreds of talented people involved in making the water physics look good as you ride down a sewer as Remy Red. They deserve an applause. No, I say visually it's a letdown because of the serious lack of variety seen. Spoilers for the story and all, but 90% of this game takes place underground, and so each level sees you surrounded by endless amounts of dirt and machinery. Makes sense considering the Underminer is the villain, and every now and then they try to shake things up by having an ice level underground or whatever. But for the most part you're just looking at the same dull and drab scenery with no real variety. it doesn't allow you to truly appreciate how good all the other aspects of the game look because they're really not doing anything all that ambitious with it. What you see on screen right now is what you're going to be seeing from start to land. So if that doesn't sound appealing to you, then I don't know, you sound pretty normal to me. Gameplay-wise, things are a bit better, but you know, I do mean a bit. Unlike the original Incredibles game, which took the approach of your more standard action-adventure platformer, Rise of the Underminer is more of a beat-em-up with light platforming elements. The camera is way more zoomed out, fixed in a single position throughout the entire thing, as you go from room to room clearing out the series of robots who spawn in. It's unfortunately one of those beat-em-ups where at the beginning of the game you have like 2 moves and nothing else, as well as said moves being super weak. And so after defeating enough enemies, you can choose to level up your character, whether it be their health, attack, grind pound, and after like an hour of doing that, it's actually kind of fun to beat them up. I also like how the upgrade menu is literally a copy-paste of the upgrade menu from the SpongeBob movie game. It is shameless. You can play as Mr. Incredible or Frozone. That's right, those are the only 2 playable characters. Which seems like a massive missed opportunity, but Frozone is by far the better character to play as, so who am I to complain? Not only does he have a move that can freeze enemies in place, but he also has this sick hover which is fun to pull off. I imagine this would be a lot more fun with a second player. You can have Frozone freeze an item and then have Mr. Incredible pick it up and chuck it at a robot for added damage. You know, it becomes a little tedious when you have to manually switch between them. However, it doesn't take long for you to get to that point where you're just mindlessly spamming moves with no real thought put into what you're doing. It's a pretty easy game, all things considered. Not to mention, there's only 10 levels in the entire goddamn thing. Meaning, you could probably beat this game in around the same amount of time it takes to watch The Incredibles movie, maybe less. Speaking of, you know, in relation to this video, none of that really matters. What we want to figure out is how this game would work as a sequel to The Incredibles. What is the story here? Well, picking up directly after the movie ended, Mr. Incredible and Frozone begin to chase after the Underminer, Bob telling his family to go take care of his minions. It's the last we see of him until the end of the game. During the chase, the 2 of them find themselves underground, chasing after the Underminer to put a stop to his deadly plans. The plan in question? Well, we learn he wants to reverse the position of the Earth's crust, filling the sky with pollution and making the whole planet appear as if it's underground. Because of it being a basic beat-em-up and only containing 10 levels, it's unfortunate that it takes such a formulaic approach to its story. From here, they go from place to place, destroying whatever robots the Underminer sends their way, and every now and then we see him briefly on a monitor or whatever, but that's really it. He has next to no presence here, and certainly no lasting impact, bizarre considering how memorable of an ending he creates in the film. Of course, we can't be too hard on it. I have to imagine if they had wanted to expand upon a plot like this for an actual Incredibles movie, we'd have seen much more of the Parr family as well as the Underminer. You know, not every game we're going to look at today aims to have the same narrative depth as you'd expect from a film, but it's just a fun little video topic, okay? Either way, they eventually meet a nice robot named Doug, who helps them rescue the captive scientists who were forced to help the Underminer enact his plan. With them, they get back to the surface for the showdown with the Underminer, killing him in a giant explosion, dead forever. And that's the game. The rest of the Parr family arrived to celebrate, thanks for doing nothing, guys, and the adventure is over. As a game, it's a fun little time waster, but don't expect to get anything more than like 2 hours of playtime out of it. But more importantly, a satisfying sequel? Well, I'd say yes and no. Yes, because it's the most natural sequel you could make to The Incredibles. The setup is brilliant. It's great we actually got the chance to see the aftermath of the film, 15 years before they re-showed us the aftermath of the film. But also no, because nothing is really done with it story-wise. Again, that's obviously going to be the issue we're going to consistently see within this video. These are video games first and foremost, but I don't know. They could have tried. If there's anything I can say about this game, it's that Heavy Iron clearly knew their limits. They probably weren't given a lot of time or budget to develop it, and so instead of getting ultra ambitious and trying to make some 8-hour epic, they opted to make a simple, short beat-em-up that's over before it has the chance to piss anyone off. And I suppose that's a good thing, right? Especially compared to some of the other games we'll be looking at today. So, Rise of the Underminer, good sequel? I'd lean more towards good than bad. It's just hard not to think this could have been so much more. But hey, we see more of the Underminer here than in the actual sequel, so that's a plus. Now, let's see how their rival DreamWorks was handling their movie sequel games with. Okay, can I just go off on a rant here real quick before we get into that? Because I've had to switch around the order and games included in this video at least 5 times because some games can't decide whether or not they're a sequel or a retelling or an adaptation. There are some video games that fans can completely accept as sequels, Ghostbusters, I'll be covering it later, unanimously considered to be the unofficial sequel to 2, at least more than these trash heaps. Back to the Future, the video game, is considered a sequel to 3, won't be covering it today. It's a Telltale game, nothing against them, I just personally don't care. You know, these are easy to discern, but how about the B-movie game, which opens after the ending of the first movie, but has Barry recount the events of the film with some new segments added because, again, it's a video game, it's expected to deviate for the sake of gameplay. It's the first movie, sure, but technically this entire game takes place after the events of the film. So does it count? I almost did count it, not just because I kind of wanted to play it again. But eventually I had to say, no, that's not a sequel. The story isn't progressed in any way. No B-movie game. Same goes for Toy Story 3, takes place after the movie, opens with them at Bonnie's house, but the actual game is a retelling with some extra levels. Can't count it. I can't in good faith do it. And so, saying all that, Shrek for Xbox just barely meets my criteria for what I'd consider a sequel. And if someone out there were to disagree with me on that, then I couldn't say they're wrong. I'd say you hurt my feelings, though. Okay, so in late 2000, a game publisher acquired the rights to Shrek's video game license for 5 years, with the studio behind Mirror's Edge being contracted to develop the first game for Xbox. It was gonna be the most next-gen licensed game ever made, taking advantage of new deferred shading technology, as well as other advanced rendering techniques. Holy fuck. So this game is pretty infamous for not being a Shrek game in the slightest. I mean, in the copyright section, they specifically call out the use of Shrek, Fiona, and Lord Farquaad, because they're the only things in here that even remotely resemble the movie. And even then, Farquaad only appears on a menu. I mean, what if I bought this game just to see Donkey? That's false advertising. There's this belief that this is a result of them being given concept art of the film from back when Shrek looked like this. But I don't buy that. Chris Farley had passed away 3 years before TDK signed their deal with DreamWorks. The timeline just doesn't match up. Although that's not to say there's no chance that some early development material was used. But even then, I think most of this game's weirdness can be attributed to Todd McFarlane designing the characters, a feature they're so proud of they printed it on the cover. What is the background here? It's like a cobblestone road, what? It's for those reasons it's hard to truly consider this a sequel to Shrek. Especially once we got the official follow-up, Shrek 4D. But for a brief 3-year period, between 2001 and 2004, this is the closest we got to a continuation of the series. And it's not a very good one. So this whole game basically revolves around blackmail. Shrek wakes up one day to find Fiona missing and a goblin laying in bed with him. That thing would be fucking horrifying to wake up next to. It's here that Merlin reveals himself, looking nothing like the Merlin we'd eventually see in Shrek 3. He's kidnapped Fiona for one reason, and it's to force Shrek into helping him stop the Ice Queen, who has stolen his crystal ball and wants to take over the world naturally. So now Shrek has got to travel through various fairy tale-based locations, such as Sweetsville and creepy castles, a lot of sewage, and perform enough good deeds across the land to clear the evil fog that blocks the way to Merlin's tower, because, again, he's still evil. I have to imagine one of the weirder aspects of this game came from budgetary restrictions. Seems like a big priority for them was making the game graphically impressive, and so I have to wonder if that cut into their voice acting budget a bit. It's because of this, everything story-related, narration, cutscenes, NPC dialogue, is voiced by the same 2 or 3 people, and god does it get old.
Capture all the evil fairies. Mirror, you use some pretty big words, commented Shrek.
What is that thing?
Bo Peep was just as charming as Shrek had imagined.
Why is she speaking on his
Is she
behalf?
explaining-
Excuse me, you there. Would you mind getting my children for me, please?
What is this game? It makes Shrek come off brain dead. He's a pretty outspoken character in the movie, so it's super unnatural to just watch him stand idly by while everyone tells him what to do. This isn't the Shrek I know and love. And now what if I told you this was actually the improved version of Shrek on Xbox? Shrekbox. All the footage you're seeing right now comes from the GameCube re-release that came out the following year, Shrek Extra Large. This is the one with Donkey on the cover for some reason. The intro to the story I talked about, by the way, was all added context given in this GameCube version. The Xbox one quite literally just opens with the magic mirror telling you that Fiona's been kidnapped, and you gotta save her. Doesn't even have the T-posing Fiona at the end. This is how the original rewarded you for all your hard work. Anyways, from what I can tell when looking at footage, it appears as if Shrek's controls have been tightened slightly. He definitely looks a lot more unwieldy on Xbox, but also the lighting saw a big overhaul. Whether that be an intentional decision, with certain segments in the original release being too dark to follow along, or the GameCube just not being able to handle the advanced rendering techniques, it's resulted in a much brighter game. It helps for platforming, but I think it only further brings attention to these weird models. I don't like that these giant, ultra-realistic spiders exist in the Shrek world. And again, Fiona is just kind of T-posing at the end. For a game that boasts so hard about its graphical capabilities, it looks quite cheap. I mean, what the hell is this fucking title screen? That is rancid. Speaking of rancid, the gameplay. It's structured like Mario 64, good deeds are power stars. The more good deeds done, the more fog disappears in the hub, which opens you up to more worlds. Do 50 good deeds and you can fight the final boss. Simple. Why is Shrek so goddamn fast? It is insane how much ground this guy covers, which is nice, considering how massive some of these worlds are, but for the type of tasks they expect you to do, I have to wonder why this speed wasn't contained to some kind of run button. The platforms can be so small, with you often elevated above layers and layers of platforms beneath you, and so it's so easy to slip off and be forced to perform it all over again. Just hope for the best this time around. The camera can be so zoomed in, which doesn't help. It's not impossible to get used to, but again, it's a weird decision, right? As you enter a world, you can activate a list of missions by speaking to the right NPC. These can range from picking up these little egg children and returning them to the goose's nest as Humpty Dumpty is teaching them how to kill themselves, or finding a bunch of candy to fill up Red Riding Hood's basket. So basically, they range from simple to infuriating. There was this one where you had to put all of Bo Peep's sheep in a pen while stopping the big bad wolf from getting inside and knocking them back out. And I don't know if it was just my game bugging out or whatever, but I could not find that last one for the life of me. I must have spent 20 minutes running around this map. You have a few extra moves at your disposal, which is nice. There's this fart explosion you can perform, which I'm sure would have made 7-year-old me laugh really hard. But it doesn't help the game from dragging on. This is one of those games that would have utterly confused me if I played it as a kid. You know, one of those ones where you'll activate something and then, like, a timer will go off, but you don't know what you're supposed to do yet, so you keep running around and, like, maybe 10 minutes later you get your quest. But by this point, you've completely lost track of where you first started the timer, and now you have to spend another 10 minutes searching for it again. It's one of those games. Bad one. I think the map design might just be its biggest problem. Again, I got used to the controls. I got used to all this, but I consistently find myself getting lost in these maps that only feel like they get bigger and bigger. The ice stage in particular can go fuck itself. I hated navigating that one. Should go without saying, but I don't think this is a very good game. I can appreciate its ambition, 10 pretty massive worlds, creating a majority of these characters from scratch. You know, in a lot of ways, this is the exact opposite of the Incredibles game I just looked at. Rise of the Underminer had a modest goal, to be short and sweet, and therefore it has no real problems achieving that. Shrek wants to be Mario 64. Bigger shoes to fill. So despite undoubtedly being the more impressive game, overall Shrek is just an unpleasant experience. It has so little to do with the film that it's hard to accept that it supposedly takes place in the same world. And even if it is a little cool to have this bizarre near bootleg version of Shrek somehow be an official product, I don't think what's here is nearly memorable enough to have it be a worthy trade-off. Unless you really like, I don't know, this guy. Now of course if they had the foresight they could have probably added in more Shrek elements without much extra work. Like the part where Shrek talks to a dragon, but it's not, you know, dragon from the movie. Even though the GameCube version, again, came out like a year later, so they could have easily added it, I don't know. But if you take all the weird, unfitting designs out of this game, then all you're left with is a mediocre platformer, with enough rough edges to fill out a bloody rhombicosododecahedron. And I don't like it very much.
But Shrek and Princess Fiona stayed in their swamp, happily ever after, with their pet.
Do you think he's had to watch them fuck? Something I was definitely too young to truly experience was the hype surrounding The Matrix when it first released in 1999. A film where a hacker nicknamed Neo discovers that his reality is nothing more than a computer simulation. With this, he's called to join the rebellion, unlock his mind, and fight the machines who have been harvesting humans for power in the real world.
I know Kung Fu.
It's a great film, not that you need me to tell you that. It was praised by critics, made $500 million at the box office, inspired a generation to reenact its iconic fight sequences. And went on to spawn 4 sequels to varying degrees of quality. But the one sequel I'm talking about today is Enter the Matrix, and Matrix Reloaded, and Revolutions. Enter the Matrix is a PS2 game that released 4 years after the original film, coming out at the same time as the next Matrix movie, Reloaded, which shot back-to-back with its own sequel, Matrix Revolutions, which would come out the exact same year as Reloaded and Enter the Matrix. As someone who has only ever seen the first one, this was very confusing information. Even more so, because instead of making an adaptation of the first film, maybe to help get folks excited for the new movie, the Wachowski brothers, now the Wachowski sisters, decided they would create an all-new storyline for the game that would showcase events happening concurrently with The Matrix Reloaded. So it's like an alternate version of the sequel that is also just as canon as the sequel. Got it. The Wachowskis being so involved in this project extended to them directing over an hour's worth of live-action footage, getting all the major cast back to reprise their roles, and means that the two protagonists you can play as in the game are modeled after the actors they gotta play them in Reloaded. It's actually pretty clever. Anytime the characters jack into the Matrix, it's the PS2 graphics, and anytime they exit and come back to reality, it's live action. Really helps sell you on this being a simulation. There was a ton of hype surrounding this game, and evidently not without reason. Seems like Atari was putting a ton of work into making sure it's the best it could be. And a new story by the Wachowskis? Fuck, man. This is gonna be the best game ever. What happened? Like, yeah, you can get a worse score, but I don't know, really? The Matrix movies following the first one were never quite able to recapture that same level of high praise. But there is one area they continued to soar, and it's being really, really good at making money. Until they didn't. And so despite the less than glowing reviews, Enter the Matrix still managed to sell over 5 million copies, which is pretty crazy. It follows two characters from Reloaded, Niobe, Captain of the Logos, which acts as the main base of the game along with her first officer Ghost. They're given the mission of recovering a warning message and delivering it to the Resistance. It's at this point the game begins running side by side with Reloaded. While Neo, Morpheus, and Trinity search for the Keymaker, Niobe and Ghost are also doing stuff. It's a game, so of course it's going to be a bit less grand, but for a fan of the franchise, it must have been so cool to see moments that were only mentioned in passing fully realized with low-poly PS2 graphics. You know, in the movie, you'll have Neo and gang get instructions on where to find the Keymaker. How did they get these instructions? Well, here we get to see how Niobe and Ghost aided in that info getting to them. It's full of small stuff like that, and it's really cool. So while the game obviously can't do anything major with its plot, otherwise it would need to also be addressed in the film, I think it's a great idea to have it serve as a way to get some added context for the rest of the Resistance. Like, Neo's the chosen one, sure, but there are still other members of this team helping them get to where they need to be. Makes you feel like your actions are making a difference in the grand scheme of things. At the start of the game, you're given the choice to either play as Niobe or Ghost. They each have their own campaign that weaves in with the other. Typically, the two will be together for the start of a mission, and split up to accomplish their different tasks before reconvening towards the end. Sometimes they'll be going through the same stage, but your role will depend on who you're playing as. Like if you're in a driving segment trying to escape the police, Niobe will act as the driver, while Ghost takes care of the cops. It's great. Game is janky as hell, though. It features these really bizarre tank controls. Ghost runs like fucking Linkara. You can't turn the camera, the levels can be way too long and repetitive, just hordes of police and agents for 30 minutes straight. But fuck man, I had so much fun. I was fully preparing myself to hate it. I have never met anyone who actually likes this game, although I don't know many Matrix fans to be fair. But the combat is just so stupid and so fun. It features this focus power you can use to enter bullet time for a limited period. Everything slows down, giving you the opportunity to deliver more damage, with less chance of the other enemy shooting you, and even then, you can take a lot of shots before dying. You think this would be overpowered, and it is. That's why it's awesome. When I think about playing games such as this when I was younger, especially based on superheroes or action stars, you often get the idea that you're not truly taking advantage of the powers these characters wield. Like they're for some reason way weaker than you think they'd be. Of course, this is to balance the difficulty. Why does Sonic run at a brisk jog in the Olympics? For the guy playing as Donkey Kong. But here, no. Every move I could have ever wanted to perform watching the movie, I can pretty much do. You can spam punches like it's nobody's business, then whack the guy across the room and watch as he ragdolls. Kick through a window and knock the enemy back, cartwheel, jump backwards while shooting in slow-mo. I swear to God, every time I thought I had seen everything it had to offer, I'd accidentally start running across the wall and kick a guy in the face or use it to do a backflip. It's very unpolished. Half the time, I didn't even know how I was pulling off these moves, but fucking hell, it is fast and fun. I like Enter the Matrix despite its many flaws, and it's unquestionably one of the most ambitious video game sequels of all time. You know, I've noticed there's a lot of similarities between The Matrix and Tron. They're both journeys about a guy being confronted with a world completely unlike his own. Both were at least partially inspired by Alice in Wonderland, and both had sequels in the form of video games. Only major difference is, Tron was nowhere near the hit The Matrix was. It's quite strange, actually. None of Tron's 3 movies have been that big of box office hits. Makes you wonder why it's such a popular franchise. I mean, it's been referenced in just about everything.
Hey, is that Stacy Beecham?
Where?
Maybe the movies are just that good, that their cult status has been able to garner them such longevity. And while I can't speak to the sequels, I think it stands true for the original. While obviously very dated these days, it's hard not to appreciate the amount of effort that went into putting the film together, especially for 1982. It's kinda crazy, actually. The original was flat out rejected for a visual effects nomination at the Oscars, due to them deciding that computer-generated imagery wasn't eligible. It's insane how something like this has now been flipped on its head, as films using AI-generated effects have no issues getting nominated. Just, I don't know, it's interesting, right? Either way, the original Tron was a cult classic. But aside from a few books, there was no attempts to further expand upon the story until 21 years later, when in 2003, Monolith Productions put out Tron 2.0 for PC, as well as Xbox the very next year, and Game Boy Advance. It may seem like a weird decision at first. Usually licensed games are designed to tie in with some upcoming project, a movie, a TV show, but nah. This was considered by the creator to be a true sequel to the film. For a time. I mean, it does make sense when you think about it. Tron is all about this guy, Flynn, who is a game programmer. And there are a series of games featured in the film. If they put the work into making this accurate to the world present in the movie, then it can often make up for some bog-standard, mediocre, licensed game gameplay. Well, turns out it's actually pretty good on that front, too. Not amazing or anything, but this is a really unique first-person shooter that did enough new while still paying tribute to what came before. It's been 20 years since the events of the film, as Alan Bradley, the guy from the first, still works at Encom. His son Jet works there too in the games section, you know, there's a bit of friction between them. Alan, who's voiced by the same guy who played him in the film, all these years later surprisingly, is disappointed that his son doesn't want to rise the ranks of the company. Included some fun nods to the movie too.
I'm happy making games. Life is short, Pop. I plan to enjoy it.
You sound like Flynn.
I don't know what his dad expected, though. You named your son Jet and expected him to play by your stupid rules? Fat chance, old man. So Alan gets kidnapped and his computer program MA3A takes him inside the grid. Encom is currently being taken over by FCON, who want to take all their user data and use it for nefarious means like targeted ads. Now it's up to Jet to accomplish 3 things. Stop FCON, defeat this virus that's inside the grid, and save his dad. There's a lot of characters inside the grid you get to talk to, like Mercury, who's on a ton of promotional material for the game despite not being in it for nearly as much as you'd think. I wonder why she's put there. I like the bits of story they included that fill in the blanks between the first movie to now. It's 2003. The internet is here, which is integrated perfectly without feeling as if it's taken away from the visual charm of the 1982 original. You got this little old man computer program who eventually allows himself to die because he knows he can't adapt to the modern computer world. The poor bastard. But most of the added character stuff is done through these emails you can read, including some that go into what happened to Flynn over the years. It's a perfectly valid form of giving the player extra story, but I'm sorry, I ain't reading it. I'm sure if I was really into Tron, I'd be all over this added lore. I'm sure it's awesome. But what I certainly can praise are the graphics. This is a nice looking game that still stands the test of time. There were no corners cut when it came to the amount of detail packed into these worlds, which you think would eventually blend together, but through clever use of color, different skyboxes, and props, you're left with this extremely atmospheric experience that truly immerses you, really makes you feel like you're in Tron. I loved this massive cyberspace city. It was so cool to walk through. And it's one of those rare games that uses the fog to its advantage, really selling how vast and empty these areas are. Some art designers who worked on the film returned to help out a bit with this one, and so it results in nothing feeling out of place or needlessly updated. This game will look just as good as it does 20 years from now as it does today. In regards to the gameplay, it tries to do a bit more than your standard shooter. I was actually surprised by the amount of platforming they wanted you to do. You got a variety of cyber guns inspired by the real-life counterparts, as well as your disc if you want to chuck that at some enemies. Using weapons takes up energy, and so over the course of the game, you'll need to update Jet to newer and newer versions of himself, which can give you more energy as well as health and other fun stuff. Wouldn't be a Tron game without the light cycle arenas, although they're easily the least interesting aspect. I find it funny that they let you view these outside of a first-person angle, and it just showcases how not exciting a match this can be when it's not being shot and edited for a movie. Just Snake, my Nokia played that. It's got some more annoying elements that I didn't fully care for, like these infected enemies. They can attack you and give you the same virus as they do, which you gotta delete by going into your inventory, which can be a tad tedious. But it's not the end of the world, as you can get some upgrades in the future that make it less intrusive. The music is awesome, perfectly selling the scope and silence. Even some stuff from the film find its way in. Goes without saying, but I think this is easily the best game we've looked at so far. And maybe it's too soon to call, but I'm not sure if Wreck-It Ralph will be getting in the way of that title. After 2 decades of dormancy, I imagine Tron 2.0 was something special to see as a fan of the series. A series you most likely assumed would never continue in any form ever again. Sure, it's not the best game ever or anything. It wasn't even the best shooter of that year. But what I may like in terms of gameplay, it more than makes up for with its art and sound design, with a story that does enough of its own thing while still acknowledging what longtime fans want to see and learn. Reviewed pretty well upon release, although it didn't sell as much as I'm sure they were expecting, and so its sequel wound up getting cancelled and the Tron franchise remained dormant yet again. Until the next sequel didn't do that well, and then its sequel did even worse. Surprisingly, Tron 2.0 is still on Steam, only like $10, so if it looked interesting to you then I'd recommend checking it out. Certainly one of the better licensed games out there. The same can't be said for what's next. Here's one I felt like giving an honorable mention to, even if I don't think it deserves a full segment itself. Chicken Little, it's an action. So, we've all seen Chicken Little, right? We've all loved it. Well, remember the iconic ending where after saving the town from aliens, Hollywood decides to make a movie about the whole ordeal and Chicken Little is played by Adam West?
But that means...
Yes, I know. The sky is falling.
Yeah, they made a game about that. I saw this in stores all the time as a kid and wanted no part of it. Who would want to play an entire game based around a 2-minute segment from the ending of a movie? I was way too smart to fall for that obvious shovelware. I would have gone insane if I knew about this one. That's the main reason I don't want to do a proper segment on Ace in Action. Also spoilers, but the game itself isn't very good either. But like, yeah, sure, it takes place after the movie, but it's not much of a sequel. Occasionally, we cut back to Chicken Little and friends playing it who acknowledge this is a real video game that also exists in their universe too.
It's the prequel to the game, loosely based on the movie, which was even more loosely based on our lives.
Wow! And that's kind of cool. That's kind of, meta. It's doing the whole Ratchet and Clank movie thing like way before. And they will acknowledge stuff that makes it clear the events of the movie did happen. Like Chicken Little and Abby are a lot more open about their crushes on each other, for all the people who are into that ship, I guess. And I'm pleasantly surprised that a majority of the voice actors from the film reprised their roles. You don't usually see that, so, that does mean you gotta listen to Adam West throughout your entire adventure, which is a genuine plus. But the game just kind of switches between the same 3 basic playstyles on repeat for 5 hours. It gets old real fast. You travel across the galaxy as Ace, who has these Ratchet and Clank style stages. They literally have the golden bolt, but it's a fucking golden acorn. Real clever, guys. Abby has these spaceship shooters, reminded me of Coco's flying levels in Crash 3. Runt is in a tank the entire time. These, unfortunately, reminded me of the tank stages from Atlantis Corpantis. And occasionally, you'll get a small hack-and mini-game where you can play as Fish. All very basic, all very okay. It was made by the same guys who developed Tak, and I'd say it's about a similar level of quality as them. If someone considered Ace in Action a cornerstone of their childhood, I really couldn't blame them. But dude, not a sequel, fight me. I don't know who it is saying this, but hey, I'm here. Okay, your next movie night is sorted, on me. It's gonna be a double feature. Chicken Little and The Thing. Goes without saying, a fantastic movie, genuinely scary. I'd say I'm a pretty tough guy when it comes to horror, but that sequence with the dogs had me on the edge of my seat. As a research team in Antarctica are menaced by what we eventually learn is a shape-shifting alien that can imitate other organisms. Despite the film closing out with an intentionally ambiguous ending, with the 2 last surviving men sitting in the ruins of their destroyed research facility after killing the alien, close to death, Universal decided that 18 years later they'd revive the franchise with a PS2 game that would also act as a sequel. Apparently it's pretty good, enough to warrant a modern remaster at least. Licensed games rarely get remasters, so that must be a good sign. I mean, it'd be hard not to capitalize on the obvious potential for a video game based around The Thing, especially with the unique mechanics implemented to help it stand apart from other horror games of the time. The story sees our protagonist Blake, as well as the rest of his squad, arriving at the same outpost from the movie, except of course it's in ruins. It's cool, it's like a parallel to the characters of the original finding the previous outpost that had already been ravaged by the creature. They eventually learn about the alien along with its abilities to replicate anything living, as well as learning there's been a massive cover-up, with a company illegally experimenting on the thing to turn it into a weapon. Blake eventually learns that the US military colonel who was a part of these experiments has injected himself with the alien virus, with plans to unleash it all over the Earth using transport plans. With that, it's up to you, and the surprise helper MacReady, the guy from the first movie, to put a stop to the now giant mutated colonel, as well as stop those plans. It's a pretty awesome continuation. I can imagine this working really well as an actual movie, although I do have to wonder how fans feel about it. Again, the ending to the original was left ambiguous on what happened to MacReady, so 20 years later getting the answer that, well, he survived and is willing to go back to the place and take the thing on again might come off a tad lame. I wouldn't blame someone for not considering this canon. The game features this trust and fear mechanic, which is perfect for a game based on The Thing. Basically, the other members of your squad can be a bit wishy-washy on whether or not they think you're a human, or the Thing. I'm gonna say the Thing a lot. And depending on how trusting they are of you, they'll either completely follow your commands, be suspicious and refuse to follow orders, or if they really don't trust you, they'll outright attack you. It requires near constant management. You can increase their trust by giving NPCs weapons or ammo, healing them. You can even do a blood test on yourself in front of them to prove you're not the Thing. On the other side of that, accidentally shooting teammates, stealing their ammo, even just pointing your gun at them for too long, can all decrease their trust in you. Then you got the fear mechanic, which is pretty similar. If you're in a dark environment, one covered in blood and corpses, hearing enemies in the distance, your squad mates will start to suffer a realistic depiction of a panic attack and become less efficient at whatever you need them to do. Or, in the worst case scenario, they can literally kill themselves. It's a really clever way of adapting one of the most prominent dynamics in the film, not knowing who around you might actually be the Thing. The trust mechanics all revolve around your actions, and the fear mechanics all revolve around the environment and your inaction to consider your teammates. I can see why the game was received so well, being considered one of the better survival horrors when it came out, and it sold incredibly well. Again, one of the few games in this video you can still officially play on modern consoles. I'm not sure if the remaster fixed any minor complaints folks had with the original, especially the occasional issues with the AI, but I think that kind of stuff is forgivable considering how ambitious of a game this is. I'd recommend it if you're into this kind of thing. I would not recommend Wreck-It Ralph for the Wii. Okay, I've been trying to find the perfect excuse to play and talk about this game for years. It might just be one of the worst games I've ever had the displeasure of going through, and I can't stop thinking about it. Wreck-It Ralph for Wii is infamously bad. I see folks shitting on this 15-year-old piece of shovelware multiple times a year. However, most don't seem to go beyond the opening cutscene, which, to be fair, is atrocious.
I'm gonna wreck it!
I hate to see my beloved home like this.
I too have never gotten past this part. I would just give up. Until today.
Felix!
Why did he have to go so hard with that scream? Now, a Wreck-It Ralph video game should be a slam dunk for obvious reasons. A film about a video game bad guy going rogue and jumping through different genres of games across a massive literal hub. This could be the gaming equivalent to Kingdom Hearts.
Oof! Oh!
Unfortunately, however, this was around the time Disney stopped giving a shit. Like, can you imagine if this game got the same level of love and care something like the Ratatouille game got? Either way, I really wanted this as a kid. Wreck-It Ralph was one of my favorite movies ever at the time. The part where he almost died nearly made me cry. I'm cringe, and that's based. I'll never be based, and that's not cringe. But as soon as it was released, for some reason before the movie, I watched a long play on YouTube, could not fathom what I was watching, and proceeded to take it off my Christmas list for that year. Got Sonic Racing transformed instead. He's here too! Now, aside from, well, all of this, there was another thing I learned about this game that completely turned me off of it, and that was that it was a sequel to the movie, not a retelling. Again, as a kid, I hated the feeling that the ending to the movie really wasn't actually the ending. Like, oh, you think this is where the adventure ended? Well, a ton more shit happened right after the credits rolled that we're just not gonna show ya. Like I said at the start of the video, if I'm buying a game based on a movie, it's because I want an interactive version of Curious George hopping around the city. I want to control Vern the Turtle dodging booby traps around the neighborhood. Saying that just unlocked a memory of the hundreds of hours I put into that fucking Over the Hedge game. Should make a video on that. Anyways, judging by what this piece of shit does have to offer, a part of me wonders if the decision to make the game a sequel to the film solely came from the fact that they could not possibly begin to replicate everything that would be needed for a direct adaptation. At least, not a good one. Like, if you were to make a Wreck-It Ralph game based off the film that even has the slightest amount of accuracy, you'd be stupid not to include your regular platforming segments along with first-person shooter stuff, small racing engine, you know? Fuck it, have playable minigames based off the in-universe Fix-It Felix game. That shit was on the App Store. A Wreck-It Ralph game has the most brilliant excuse to replicate and even parody a ton of different genres. Too bad our budget can barely fill a piggy bank. And so that's my theory as to why this is a sequel, because there certainly wasn't some grand continuation to the story they just had to tell. Basically, we get a short recap of the ending to the film. Through this weird, unrendered looking cutscene, it's quite laughable. So, one of the main conflicts in the film was that while game hopping, Ralph accidentally transported this Cybug from Hero's Duty into Sugar Rush, and throughout the film they've been procreating, eventually attacking the place, which Ralph has to stop by luring each of them into a giant beam of lava, or lava equivalent. All's well that ends well, movie over, everyone lives happily ever after, except no! Twice. See, apparently right after the events of the first movie, Ralph noticed, whoa, we missed a few! Really, that is the plot. Now it's up to Ralph and Felix to defeat all the bugs, namely 3 giant ones that act as bosses. That is all we get in terms of plot, no joke. Every now and then you get one of these just amazing sequences of the two of them talking before a level. I like that Felix is perpetually floating. And that's it. Also, Jack McBride was apparently more than happy to return as Felix, but there was no chance of them snagging John C. Reilly for this one. And so we unfortunately have to listen to this for the entire adventure.
Whoa! Big fella, aren't you? You probably got picked first for volleyball!
Okay, it's the elephant in the room, right? This looks disgusting. It is unfathomable that they thought they could put this on the Wii, in 2012 no less. You have to try and make a console game look this bad. And this is where my own personal theory comes in. Let me know if I sound crazy down below. So, Wreck-It Ralph didn't just release for the Wii, it also came out for the Nintendo 3DS and original DS. Look at the gameplay. Kinda familiar, right? Usually games on the DS and 3DS look pretty different, but now they're near identical. You don't think? Yeah, so it is my belief this either started development as a DS exclusive and they decided to port it over to other systems without updating anything about it, or they always wanted to put it on these systems, but couldn't be bothered commissioning a version designed for them. Whatever the answer may be, the end result is the same. This shit looks and sounds awful.
Another day, another ladder.
That's a daft. And none of that is to mention the music. Fuck, there's something about the main theme, and the way it plays over the opening cutscene while Ralph is watching Vanellope's world being taken over, that just pisses me off. I don't know what it is. It sounds like the fucking sticky keys effect. It's gotta have some of the worst sound design I've ever heard in a game, by the way. The characters are constantly chanting and getting cut off while chanting.
Maybe they just need a hug. A bug hug. Wow, I've never been cheered for destroying something before.
Then you die and have to listen to Sarah Silverman, who was barely in this, by the way, chastise you for failing. That is a fate worse than death.
Video games don't rot your brain, but something obviously did.
So this is a 2D platformer where you can freely switch between Ralph and Felix on the go. Ralph can barge through objects, while Felix can throw his hammer and repair different things to help you get through the stages. It is as basic as they come. Feels like you're playing a student project and not a very good one. Each world has 4 stages with a boss fight acting as level 5. You start by running through Fix-It Felix Jr., follow it up with Hero's Duty, head on over to Sugar Rush, and that's it. I thought we started the game at Sugar Rush. Why would they go straight to their world? It's kind of fucked up, guys. Also, you got that right. This game only has 15 levels. And in the end, took me less than an hour and a half to beat on my first try. It is pitiful. The bosses offer no challenge at all. First of all, I didn't even know there were any. After you beat level 4, it doesn't give you the option to head to the next part. You get booted back to the hub, so, naturally I moved on. And only at the end I realized I now had to go back and fight 3 bosses in a row. Not that they offer much variety. The first one starts with the characters being like, "Oh, we gotta use the beacons, guys!" But what they should have said was just punch it 40 times. No, with all that being said, is it a good sequel though? Do I even need to say it? This is the worst one we've looked at today, second to none. What did we learn from this? That after the events of the movie, Felix and Ralph ran around for another hour and a half defeating more bugs? Great. Obviously, I can't be ignorant of the fact this is very clearly a low-budget video game with no priority being put on the story. So what could I expect? But I don't know. Something amazing, I guess. I should have said that at the Incredibles one. Just take a look at the game's concept art. This is amazing. Maybe originally they had the plan to let you play as Ralph and Vanellope at the same time. Or it was a co-op thing. Either way, sounds awesome. The amount of detail here is insane. It's the visuals from the film emulated beautifully to a digital illustration. Then you see how it was translated to the final product. A Wreck-It Ralph video game should have been a guaranteed hit. Instead, it is shovelware in its purest form. I do not envy the developers who had to make this. They most likely were not given a lot of time or money to put this together. Not to mention my theory that it was just an upscaled, slightly tweaked version of a DS release. But that doesn't change the fact that Wreck-It Ralph for Wii is a bad sequel and an even worse game.
Our real job is making you gamers happy, 1 quarter at a time.
You failed. 2009's Ghostbusters the video game might possibly be the most interesting game in this entire video, at least to me. It's another case of a sequel coming years after the film, with Ghostbusters 2 releasing all the way back in 1989. Bill Murray was famously against doing Ghostbusters 3, which is assumed to be at least partially a result of a feud between him and Harold Ramis. But that didn't mean there weren't ideas for what a third installment would entail. And so in the mid-2000s, it was decided that some of these scrapped ideas be resurrected and used as the basis for a Ghostbusters video game. A third-person Ghostbusters for Xbox 360 was like an 80s man-child's wet dream. Same as that new Ninja Turtles game by Platinum that just got announced fucking 4 days ago. Same breed of nostalgia and competent studios. While they could have easily thrown together some slop and called it a day, it seems as if they were going all out to make this a landmark moment of the Ghostbusters franchise. All the main cast are back. Even Bill Murray, how the fuck did he agree to this? Dan Aykroyd is helping oversee the script, and again, they're using he and Harold Ramis' script ideas for inspiration. Dan has straight up said, this video game is essentially the third movie, and so it was great to see that upon booting it up, yeah, it feels like a film. You know, this video is all about movie sequel video games, but of course none of them could be a true replacement for another film. They're just two entirely different mediums. Like, sure, Wreck-It Ralph treats itself like a sequel to the movie and all, but what actually happens? They ran around for a bit and the credits rolled? You know, we all know if this was a true sequel to Wreck-It Ralph, it would have flossing and Dan TDM. However, as soon as you start Ghostbusters, it's clear they're attempting something much more theatrical. Cutscenes are framed like an actual film. They reuse the entire score from the original, which really elevates what you're seeing. Even though it doesn't lead to any gameplay, they still decide to feature an opening where we see a case of a ghost attacking someone, just like how the first one started. I really like that the tutorial takes place in the same hotel where the guys caught their first ghost in the movie, and it takes advantage of being a video game by having the characters give you some more context during downtime, like how the cleaning lady from the first wound up suing them. Really gives you a greater sense of immersion, and fits along well with the plot of you being their newest employee. It's Thanksgiving as well as 2 years since the events of Ghostbusters 2, where they go out of business after being sued because of the damages they caused at the end of the first one. Now the Ghostbusters have become city contractors, which means they're now insured to fight ghosts. It's pretty funny, actually, as you destroy thousands of dollars worth of property. The game shows you a little counter in the bottom left showing how much the city has to shell out to replace it. You're the rookie, the crew using you to test out their new experimental ghost hunting devices, as Ivo Sandor, the leader of Gozer's cult, returns in death as an all-powerful deity. So it's up to the Ghostbusters, and you, to defeat the cultists who are aided by their fucking murder victims, and then put a stop to Shandor. It's a pretty awesome plot for a third Ghostbusters movie, especially making Shandor the antagonist. It's a lot more action-heavy compared to the first film, but it's a video game, it's gonna have more moments like that. But I appreciate that they still kept that cynical edge that defined Ghostbusters comedy. I can see why fans consider this the true third film. Definitely a better pick than any of this crap. And I find the gameplay to be simple, but fun and addicting. I'm honestly more enamored by the story and everything around the release of this game more than the actual gameplay itself, which, hey, I think can be seen as a positive considering this topic. Like, did you know that depending on the version of the game you're playing, this
Supernatural. Weird too.
can look like this? Yeah, I guess they didn't even want to attempt trying to translate this semi-realistic look of the PS3, Xbox 360 version onto a Wii. And with it being planned to release on PS2 and PSP as well, they made the smart choice of completely altering the art style of those ports. It is crazy to watch them side by side, like, it is the exact same game, just one looks like it's for babies. It's honestly a perfect example of how much art direction can completely alter the tone of something. Releasing it on so many systems paid off, with the game not only reviewing well, but also selling millions of copies. It's so weird, I barely ever hear anyone talk about this game, but it's still getting re-released to this day. Got a remaster back in 2019, you can play this thing on your Switch. Really, the only issue with the game is that it did so well that it supposedly convinced Sony that they should make a new movie. You're to blame. Alright, maybe I'm gonna catch some flack for this, but I did not care for Scarface.
What?
I don't know if it's just because I'm watching it at the wrong time or in the wrong mood, but I cannot make it through this film without falling asleep. Someday I'll give it another chance, but for now, not for me. Despite never finishing it, I am aware of the ending. I mean, how could you not? It's one of the most iconic moments in cinema. Tony Montana goes out in a blaze of glory. Everything he's done throughout the film has caught up with him and he's killed. Fuck. How are we gonna make a sequel about this? Well, Radical Entertainment had a genius idea. Let's just redo the ending. And so we got 2006's Scarface: The World Is Yours, which featured an alternate ending from the film where Tony survives. It's a neat idea, definitely made to capitalize on the rise of games like Grand Theft Auto, but it also gives fans an answer to the question of, what would Tony have done if he hadn't been shot? The game opens during that mansion shootout, except this time Tony notices the assassin, killing him just in time. He's escaped death, but his criminal empire is done for. He has no money, the rival gangs have taken over his territory, and so the game sees Tony needing to rebuild from scratch. It's a complete power fantasy. You're dropped in this large open world where you can smuggle drugs, expand your territory, launder money through purchasing businesses. Gives it a unique selling point over GTA. All the acts you commit affecting your respect meter, but you also have a balls meter, which rewards you for basically acting like Tony. Insulting enemies, surviving various situations, all make your meter go up, which can be used for upgrades. No chance of them getting Al Pacino back for this, but he did give them permission to use his likeness, which is cool. It's crazy just how different the ending to this game is compared to the film. I thought at first it was going to end with Tony being killed in a different way, kind of showing that no matter what, if you're in this business, then there's only one way to go out, but no. Tony gets revenge on the guy who destroyed his empire and walks out with his fucking severed head. It is insane to watch both these endings back to back.
Say hello to my little friend! So say goodnight to the bad guy.
Yeah, he just gets everything he wants. It's honestly really cool to have this sort of thing exist. Helps that the game is pretty solid too. Scarface: The World Is Yours is an idea that shouldn't work, completely undoing one of the most memorable endings in cinema. But then making it clear it's not a retcon, it's not canonical, helps you appreciate it for what it is. Still think the movie's boring. Here's an interesting one. A sequel to Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, Oogie's Revenge. I didn't know much about this one going in, aside from Jack's green goop. I remember that from the movie. So color me surprised when I learned, not only is this game developed by Capcom, but it's a Devil May Cry clone. That's not a bad idea. Honestly, it's pretty clever. Don't have enough time to make your licensed game? We'll just reskin an already proven formula and call it a day. And hey, this is also one of the only games on my list that actually feels like a sequel. It's not some weird offshoot or completely bare bones. This, along with Tron 2.0 and Ghostbusters, actually feel like the developers are taking it being a sequel into account when coming up with a story. Oogie's Revenge is probably on the lesser side of that, but I mean, takes longer than 3 hours to beat, that's gotta count for something. It's been a year since the events of the original movie, as Jack is once again feeling as if his Halloweens have gotten boring, and so sets out to look for some inspiration for next year's. Pretty sure that's what led to the entire first movie happening, but okay. However, Jack is eventually called back to Halloween Town by Sally, and quickly realizes that things have changed a lot in his absence. Oogie's returned for some revenge! Having been sewn back together by lock, shock, and barrel, dude, they just need to kill these kids already. The doctor has had his brain replaced, Sally is being held in a crypt, and all the holiday leaders aside from Jack and Santa have been kidnapped, with Oogie planning to become the 7 Holidays King once they're dealt with. So now it's up to Jack to rescue his friends, save Christmas again, and defeat Oogie again. Oogie gets a new form at the end, absorbing all the trash and insects around the place, and becomes Mega Oogie. Very hard to take that name seriously. I keep almost calling him Boogie.
I'm in tremendous pain! I'm in tremendous pain! Help me! Help me! Help!
And so after using the powers of Halloween and Christmas, as well as his snot whip, Oogie is killed. Santa thanks Jack for all he's done, who realizes that his home and loved ones are way more important than making new discoveries. He and Sally kiss atop Spiral Hill the same way the film ends, and Jack learns to never leave. We're so incompetent, Jack. We'll literally die without you. Again, gotta reiterate, it's not as if a video game like this is gonna have the same opportunity as a film to explore the characters on some deeper level or have, like arcs and stuff. But all in all, I think this is a solid idea for a video game-based sequel. It's got all the characters you'd expect, allows us greater opportunity to explore the town, and I love that the game both starts and ends on a boogie boss. No, Oogie. Showing you just how powerful he's gotten over the course of the plot. Took a while to get used to Jack's stand-in, knowing hell Danny Elfman was gonna voice him in this. But I don't know, he just sounded too soft to me. Like there's no way in hell anyone would ever be intimidated by this guy.
I'm going to save everyone and return Halloween Town back to how it was. I need you to open the main gate.
And in relation to the music, I was surprised they managed to license out a lot of the iconic songs from the film. The game features these big boss battles where you have to hit the boss to acquire these music notes, and after getting enough you're sent into this dance battle sequence where you have to match the button presses to do extra damage. Some of these take existing Nightmare Before Christmas songs and add new lyrics, while others are new songs created for the game entirely. It's really cool, just a little long. It took me ages to realize what moves I had at my disposal, and so I spent way too long in that first fight against Oogie. And so I had to listen to the same few lyrics repeated again and again.
It's over! I'm serious! Just who do you think you are?
No more saying cuss words, guys!
It is also a nice looking game. I played the PS2 version, and while I hear the Xbox One looks slightly better, I think it's pretty stellar still, perfectly capturing the film's unique art style. For a second, I was sure they just ripped assets from Kingdom Hearts for the Halloween Town hub. They're pretty identical. One of these days I'll just say fuck it and upload a big Kingdom Hearts video if anyone wants to see that. Still in the second one. But yeah, the animations are fluid, we see a ton of characters from the movie, and everything being so, well, dull, only makes Jack's weapon stand out more, which is very helpful. He can get pretty tiny on the screen at times, mainly due to the fixed angles, which took a bit of getting used to as well. So, short segment, one of the better sequels we looked at today. Except, here's the part I've avoided mentioning. The game kinda sucks. Yeah, no, with everything I've said so far, you'd think Oogie's Revenge would be some underappreciated classic, which, if I played it as a kid, I could see why some would think that. But for me personally, there was just too much shit that got hard to look past. Mainly in relation to the combat and mission structure. So basically the whole thing. Like I said earlier, this is a pretty blatant Devil May Cry clone, which sounds awesome, but it does a whole lot of little things that bog the experience down. So Jack has two moves with his whip, a standard strike and a grab. For ages, I thought this was all you could do before like 2 hours in I got bored and started spamming buttons, and realized that after grabbing an enemy, you can either continuously slam them into the ground, or throw them at another for added damage. I would say you shouldn't have to expect the game to tell you every single move you can perform, but fucking hell, they notify you about everything else. You constantly get this little 0 notification in the bottom left, which sometimes has useful information, and other times is just to inform you that you got a new character statue. Great, thank you. Now that wouldn't be that big of an issue if everything in this game didn't take so fucking long. Again, I get a 0 notification, and I have no idea if it'll contain useful information, and so I play it safe and select it. Why does that take so long? And maybe it doesn't seem that bad at just watching it here, but I'm telling you, it is so tedious to have to sit and wait for the game to load a basic menu constantly, and pausing is just as bad. It adds such a monotonous feel to everything. I couldn't be bothered using my items during a fight because the last thing I want to do is stop my flow to sit and wait for a pause screen to load. I also just gave up on saving at a certain point because the cutscene repeats every single time, as well as then having to sit through the long-ass loading screen. It honestly ruins it. Maybe it's not as bad on Xbox. Honestly, half the tedium I experienced with this game was the frequency of load screens. But even without them, it wouldn't stop the actual gameplay from being so repetitive. Just fighting the same hordes of enemies over and over. And then, you get a new power-up eventually. Jack can turn into the Pumpkin King. Well, he is the Pumpkin King. He gets a Pumpkin King outfit, and you can squirt fire, but the game never fucking tells you that you unlocked it. Again, they notify you about everything else going on. I like the mission structure of it all. Each segment of gameplay is considered its own chapter, but I think it only highlights further how repetitive it all is. So many chapters just consist of you being given a task, you try to perform it, get sidetracked by a different task along the way, chapter over. I accomplished nothing. And none of that can top the fact that every single time you face a regular enemy, they play This Is Halloween on repeat in the background. Every time. Dude, I love the concept, the graphics, and those dance battle boss fights are a genuinely good idea. They tried to make the video game a musical to match the film, they didn't have to do that. But shit like that only makes it more apparent that Oogie's Revenge is a good game trapped inside a mediocre one, as sad as it is to say. Still, though, it remains one of the better sequels we've seen so far. It at least tries. Wreck-It Ralph. And up next, we got a double sequel, as not only is this game a continuation of a film franchise, but also the next entry in an existing video game series. It's Saw 2 Flesh and Blood. When I hear the title for this game, I just think about Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Of course, I talked about this 3 years ago during my giant Saw retrospective, where I just could not find a copy of it. But what do I have here? Saw 2 Flesh and Blood for the PS3 found in a CEX last year. Don't own a PS3 though. I thought this would be perfect because while working on this segment, they somehow just announced a new Saw video game, which I assumed would be in the style of these ones and got really excited as I kinda liked the first Saw game. Nope, the second they said 3v1, I was out of there. Already commissioned the thumbnail art though. I do want to highlight the game for a bit. I do love me some Saw. I'm telling you guys, I've watched through that entire series like 3 more times since that video came out. I was so devastated when Saw 11 got cancelled. Anyways, Saw 2 Flesh and Blood takes place between Saw 1 and Saw 2, but it's also a sequel to Saw, the video game, which ended with Detective Tapp, the main detective from the first Saw movie, who watched his partner get killed by Jigsaw, deciding to take his own life after realizing how much his obsession with Jigsaw has consumed his life. Now his son, Michael, has begun looking into his death, which, you guessed it, winds up with him getting put in a trap himself. If I said it once, I'll say it again, why the fuck would you live in the state, never mind, the town, where you know this is frequently happening? So you go through the game, beating crappy puzzles, killing people, saving people, whatever, and then you get to the end, where the game suddenly switches focus onto some random guy you played as briefly at the start of the game, who was given a choice between the path of blood and the path of flesh. Finally, hours later, you get to see what your choice led to, even though it literally does not matter as you have no clue what you were deciding at the beginning. If you chose blood, you kill Michael and get confronted by Jigsaw, who tells you that you're free to leave. But then, he gets mad, tries to kill Jigsaw, who fucking obviously has a trap prepared for this very situation, and you're dead. Great. But if you choose the path of flesh, then Michael gets a tape asking him to join forces with Jigsaw, and is given the choice to either leave or don a pig mask and help Jigsaw punish future criminals of the world. And some average dudes who aren't happy enough for his liking. Which ending is the canon one? I don't know. You never see Campbell again, so I have to assume it's the one where he dies, but then what's the point in the other one? Which is supposed to even be the good ending. So, you're telling me you have a 50-50 chance of either dying, or being given another 50-50 chance of going free or joining the dark side. He just wanted to know what happened to his dad. All we really do learn is that some corrupt cops got cold feet after Tapp learned of their drug operation, and so got him fired for raiding Jigsaw's lair without a warrant in the first movie, which of course, deepened his obsession with the killer and got put in a trap himself in the first game, and had his mental state worsened so greatly that he decided to kill himself. Wow, Jigsaw, your rehabilitation therapy works wonders. And finally, speaking of myself, this is SpongeBob Hero Pants, the worst sequel game ever. Not gonna build up to that at all, I don't think this game deserves it. Now, I talked about it briefly during my big SpongeBob game ranking from the start of the year. Would you be shocked if I told you I started working on this video like 2 months before that one? Shrek was a really infuriating game. Anyways, it was through that video that I learned this game wasn't an adaptation of the Sponge Out of Water movie like I had thought it was. And instead, it was a sequel, kinda. I say kinda because, fucking look at it. So it's been an undisclosed amount of time since the events of the film, where SpongeBob and friends all went to the surface to face off against an evil pirate who had stolen the Krabby Patty secret formula using a magic book. Seems like business as usual before Bubbles the Magic Dolphin returns, thankfully not singing an epic rap battle this time. He informs the group that someone has stolen the last page of the book, and is using it to make all this weird junk happen. And so he turns the gang back into their superhero forms from the movie, and they're off. Look, I know kids are stupid, I know they can put up with some trash, I know I did, but it gets to a point. Imagine being the head of a game company knowing your product looks like this. You ever wonder if they think about the kids who got this for Christmas or their birthdays over anything actually worth their time? Do they think those kids actually had fun? It's a basic fucking platformer, it bugs out all the time, and your superhero forms do nothing, they're fucking invincibility stars from Mario. It is just a single hour of mind-numbing gameplay, and then, at the end, if you didn't collect all the bonus pages, you're canonically sent back in time to redo it all. That sounds like hell. Well, what do I earn if I do collect them? Well, Bubbles gives you a time machine so you can do it all over again. It's like the illusion of choice that's just as bad. Oh, and who stole the last page of the book? It was SpongeBob. He did it by accident. They had the gall to nominate themselves for a Kids' Choice Award. So, what did we learn today? That despite their bad reputation, there are a handful of quality licensed games out there? That it's a lose-lose to make a video game a sequel to a film because your game is either going to be bogged down by cutscenes or not even get the opportunity to tell an interesting story? Not to mention eventually become obsolete as everything needs a reboot or revival? I think it's that I clearly have a lot of repressed childhood anger towards that Wreck-It Ralph game.